Well, good evening everyone, and welcome to yet another TechnoLive Intermediate. I hope you are well. It was actually sunny today. I don't know why I always mention the weather at the start of a stream. It just seems to be my thing, but yeah, it was actually sunny today, which was nice. Anyway, that's enough small talk and pleasantries out of the way. Let's just dive straight into what we're going to be doing. So, just a brief reminder. That's our schedule for the week, and this will be every week for the foreseeable future. We got TechnoClubs on Monday, Wednesday and Friday. You can sign up to those on the TechnoCamps website. We also have live streams on a Tuesday. Last Tuesday, Dan from Bagger did a Minecraft education stream. It was a good watch, that one. Good one to follow along with. We come to TechnoLive Intermediate, and that's me, Jack, yours truly. And that is what we'll be doing. So, if you need to get in touch during the stream, you can go to technocamps.com. And there is a little chat bubble there. You could give me a bell, you know, if maybe your code doesn't work or just want to chip in and say something. There's always that. If you want to have a look at the website for both TechnoClubs and live streams, it is available at bit.ly/technoclubs. And that's a good site. I recommend bookmarking that one because you can watch the streams live on there and it'll automatically update them all, and yeah, easy to see. Or alternatively, come see us on the YouTube channel. You know, like and subscribe and all that gubbins that everyone always says. But you know the drill by now. That brings us on to what we are doing today. Well, that's an interesting one. So, if you recall last week, I looked at one of my favourite PlayStation 1 games out there, Spyro Year of the Dragon, which is better known as Spyro 3. It came out in the year 2000, so it's over 20 years old. And one thing I always talk about with that game, the one thing that I say really sells that game to me, is the fabulous music. And the music was composed by someone called Stuart Copeland. And Stuart Copeland was a member of The Police, which was a band that ran with Sting. So I just find it amazing that a member of quite a popular band ends up doing a video game soundtrack, and, in my opinion, one of the best ones out there. In fact, let me just play you a squirt of it. This is from Spyro 2. Isn't that amazing? Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just nostalgia talking. But you could hear when that was playing, it had some very weird instruments in it, some very synthetic electronic sounds. And that comes from a sample pack called Distorted Reality 2. Now, this is the album cover of it, and this was very popular back in the 90s. But what you could do was you could buy these sample packs, and they came usually on CD, and they contained thousands upon thousands of samples that composers and artists could use in their music. And it was so successful, it appears in pretty much everything that was made in the late 90s. So you can hear Distorted Reality in The Matrix. You can hear it in Super Mario for 64, for the Nintendo 64. You can hear it in Worms Armageddon for the PlayStation 1. You can hear it in Spyro 1, 2 and 3 for the PlayStation 1. You can hear it in Rayman 2 and Rayman Rush, again for the PlayStation 1. You can even, believe it or not, you can actually hear it in the soundtrack of Breaking Bad. Which is interesting because Breaking Bad was, of course, around 2008. So quite late, quite late 2000s. So it's definitely an incredibly popular sample pack. And I'm going to play you an example. It's split up by how fast each track is. So let's do 1, 2, 3. Let's see this one. Actually, I'm going to turn that down a bit because I don't know how loud it's going to come out. Oops, I think that might have been too loud. I do apologise. So that's just one track, and it's got lots of different samples on it, lots of different clips of interesting musical sounds, and you can actually hear them in certain tracks. So let me try and find the right one. I think that was the one that just played, actually. Hear that one? Well, we can hear that in a Spyro track. No, wrong one. But you get the picture. It appears absolutely everywhere. So you can hear that beat in the background. I think we can find the beat somewhere. No. I had this all planned out nicely, so we could actually go through and see, match things up, and I've just seemed to have lost them all. Okay, so that's a Spyro track, and I'm sure it's not this one. Oh, there we are. This is the one I was talking about. Hear that weird kind of synthy sound? That's present in this one. Yeah, it's very subtle, but basically this sample pack is absolutely everywhere. And what we're going to do today is we're going to basically set about making our own sample pack we're going to make a synthesizer. And to do that, we are going to use this website, editor.p5js.org. That is editor.p5js.org. Ooh, hello. Anyway, enough of that. So, going to editor.p5js.org gets you to a site that looks like this. Now, we've used this before, but that was back in the old days. Back before we rebranded to TechnoLive. This is a site that lets you experiment with a JavaScript library called P5. And if I go to File, Examples, we can see that there are all sorts of examples. There's examples for drawing shapes. There's examples for drawing 3D shapes. There's playing sounds. There's getting input from the mouse and the keyboard. We've got 3D shaders. We've got drawing. We've got website stuff like adding, website components. We've got lighting, simulations, math. Let's forget about math. But P5 is an amazing library, and we're going to use this to make a synthesizer. And the very first component of any synthesizer is an oscillator. Now, an oscillator is just something that goes from one value to another and back again. And it'll slide between those two values either smoothly or abruptly. It all depends on how you set it up. So we're going to make a new oscillator, and to do that, I'm going to look inside the first 3 lines. We've got function setup, create canvas. That creates somewhere where it's going to draw anything that we wanted it to draw. And then it's got a close curly bracket. Now this is JavaScript, so we use open curly brackets and close curly brackets to sort of show what parts of the code our commands are part of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into function setup, and after create canvas, I'm going to press enter a couple of times to give me some space where I can start writing all of my setup code. Setup code is stuff that happens when you first create the, when you first run the program. And in the setup, I'm going to make sure I am between the open curly bracket and the closed curly bracket. So for me, that's going to be line 4. I'm going to create an oscillator. So let's call him, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a pun on oscillator. Let's go Oscar. So we're going to call our oscillator Oscar. And we're going to say Oscar equals. Now this is going to be a new oscillator rather than an old oscillator. So I'm going to literally type the word new. And now we need to say what type, what is Oscar? Oscar's an oscillator, and oscillator belongs to the P5 library. So I need to do P5 dot, and then I need to type oscillator with a capital O. Now the thing about oscillator, it's a bit of a rough spelling. At least I find it's capital O SCILLATOR. So far we've got the line Oscar equals new p5.oscillator, and immediately after oscillator I'm going to open a round bracket and then close a round bracket, and then because this is JavaScript, we must end every single JavaScript command with a semicolon. So take a moment to look at that. We've got Oscar equals new p5 dot oscillator with a capital O, open round bracket, close round bracket. And we have now set up Oscar to be an oscillator. Basically, Oscar's going to make some noise. But we need to tell it what type of noise it's going to make, what type of movement from one value to another. And there's lots of types, but the first type we're going to use is a sine wave. And to tell it that Oscar's going to be using a sine wave, inside the rounded brackets at the end of oscillator, I'm going to type apostrophe. Let me try that again. Apostrophe. The P5 editor has been very kind for us and has actually written out 2 of them automatically. But I'm going to go in the middle of the 2. And I'm going to type in what type of wave I want to use. I want to use a sine wave. S-I-N-E. Okay. We are one step closer to being able to play our synthesizer. But I want to put something else in first. I want to make sure that Oscar isn't playing too loud, because otherwise that could really hurt our ears, especially if you're wearing headphones like I am. So I'm going to press enter to bring me onto the new line. And it's here that I should change how loud Oscar is. Now, when we're doing sound processing, how loud someone is referred to as the amplitude. So we're going to type in Oscar dot amp, A-M-P, which is short for amplitude. And after typing amp, I should immediately, with no spaces, follow that up with an open bracket, a close bracket, and a semicolon. And with that typed out, I can now put a value inside the amp brackets. And that value is going to represent how loud Oscar is. Now, 1 is incredibly loud, 0 is silent. So I want this to be slightly, so we can still hear it, but it's not going to blow out my ear. So I'm going to say 0.1. Oscar.amp 0.1. If I try it low first of all. When it comes to audio, it's always best to try things at the lowest volume and then turn it up, rather than start at the highest volume and then blow out your eardrums. But I'm going to start at 0.1 and I'm going to turn that up if I need to. So I recommend you do the same. Oscar.amp 0.1. Okay, now I've set the volume of Oscar, I can now play Oscar. And that's nice and simple. We just say Oscar dot start, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. You'll get fed up of me saying that little phrase at the end of every command, but it's needed. Otherwise it won't work. So Oscar.start, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. And now hopefully when I press play, it should make a noise. I'm just going to turn down the volume in the stream manager and then turn it up as needed because I don't want to hurt your ears. I'm going to click play. Okay, that's coming through for me. I'm going to turn it up for you. There we are. That's the sound that Oscar is making. It's quite high-pitched. It's quite unpleasant. But we have made our first start on the journey to, well, making a synthesizer. Okay. So we heard that Oscar was quite high-pitched. Maybe we want to change that, because otherwise, what's the point? If it stays at one pitch all the time, then we can't do anything fancy with it. So, before the line where I say Oscar.start, I'm going to go above that line to the previous one. So I'm looking at Oscar.amp now. I'm going to press enter to give me some space. And before we start Oscar, we can set the frequency of Oscar. So Oscar dot. Now, to set the pitch of Oscar, the keyword is frequency or freak or F-R-E-Q. So that's what I'm going to type out, F-R-E-Q. And say it with me, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. And with that in place, we can actually put a value inside the Oscar.freak or Oscar.frequency. And the numbers that we can put in here, that's in hertz. So 0 is so low that no human can hear it. 22,000 is so high that only children can hear it. And it's not a nice smooth scale. It actually, doesn't increase smoothly. So we're going to start picking quite low numbers and see what effects we get. So let's try 100 for now. I'm just going to type in 100 after frequency. And when I press play, ooh, that's quite a noise. It's quite low, but it's quite a noise. Let's turn it lower. Let's go 50. So let's see what 50 is like. I'm going to turn that down a little bit because I have no idea what sound it's making for anyone watching. So let's go lower. Ooh, I don't know whether you can pick that up, but that is so low it's actually making my bones shake somewhat. Ow. Maybe not. Let's try 500. 500 is quite high pitched. So that's a great way of, creating a nice, simple synthesizer. What do we want to do now? Let's add a little bit of interactivity. Let's make it so that we can change the frequency when we want to. And for that, we'll need a slider. And a slider is just something that you could use. You'd find it on a website, or you'd find it, in a piece of software. It's just a slider that turns something up or down. We're going to create one of those, and that's going to change the frequency for us. So what I am going to do first is I'm going to make sure that Oscar.freak is set to 0. So we're going to start so that Oscar is not making a sound that anyone can actually hear. So I've set that to 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn that up only using the slider. And to get the slider, it's a nice, lovely bit of code, nice and simple. We need to give our slider a name. So let's call our slider... I'm just trying to think of a name that's a pun on sliding. Sid? No, that's not close enough. Oh dear. Now, I can't think of anything clever. Let's just call our slider. Pretty boring, but yeah. Who can do comedy under pressure? Anyway, slider is the name of our slider. And I now need to tell slider what it is. So slider equals create slider is the keyword. And create slider does exactly what it says on the tin. It creates a slider and calls it slider. Oh, I've just made it even more confusing. But create slider is the keyword. We need to tell the slider what values it goes from. So at the very left, it's going to start at 0. And at the very right, we need to choose what value it can go up to. So if we do create slider, open bracket, it's already filled in a close bracket for us. We need to do what the very lowest minimum number it can do is, and that is 0. Then I'm going to put a comma, and now I need to put the very highest number that we'll let it do. So just for experimentation, I'm going to put in 500 as our upper maximum. Then I'm going to type in a close bracket, because we must close every bracket that we open. And because it's the end of a command, I'm going to finish that off with a lovely semicolon. So you've now created a slider called slider, and it goes from 0 to 500. We're not quite done here yet, though. If we click play now, we can see, at the bottom, it might be a little bit small on your screen, but you can see at the bottom of our canvas, on the right hand side, there is now a slider that doesn't appear to be doing anything, but we can slide it around as much as we like. Is there any way I can make that bigger? I'm not sure. Do I want? No, I won't. If you can't see it, trust me in that it's there. There's a little blue slider that I can drag around and change values on. I don't know why it has appeared so tiny on my screen, but it's there. Okay, so we've got it appearing, but we haven't got it doing anything yet. And this is what we need to do next. And this doesn't take place in the setup function. So we've been writing all of our code so far in setup. This is stuff that happens when we first run the program. Whereas we want our slider to update the frequency of Oscar constantly, all the time, not just at the start. So we need to actually put this in the draw function. So for me, it's lines 12, 13 and 14. It might be different lines for you. But at the bottom, we have this draw function. And at the moment, it's got background in it. If I press enter... Ooh, I don't want to do that. If I press enter after background, I could give myself some space. And this is where the magic happens. This is where we're going to tell slider... Sorry, we're going to update Oscar's frequency using data from the slider. So I'm going to say Oscar dot freq or freak or FREQ. Oscar dot frequency or sorry, Oscar dot FREQ. Open bracket. Now what I need to do here is, because I'm setting the frequency of Oscar, I need to find the value of the slider. And that's nice and simple. That is just slider, or the name of our slider. We were very boring. We called our slider, which is just even more confusing. But if you'd called yours Bob, you'd type Bob here. But slider dot value. Now, after value, we need an open bracket and a close bracket. And after the whole thing, we need another close bracket. Oh, not another one. We need a close bracket. And then finally, because this is the end of a command, a semicolon. So you should have Oscar dot FREQ open bracket slider dot value open bracket close bracket semicolon. That's the joy of JavaScript. Lots of brackets, but it's a good skill to get a hold of. Oscar.frequency open bracket slider.value open bracket close bracket semicolon. God, I'm like a parrot on repeat. Anyway, with that in place, we now have it so that our slider will update the frequency of Oscar. So I'm going to press play and you listen out for me changing the pitch. So at the moment we've got a very low pitch because the slider is really low at the bottom, and I can turn it up. And as much as I drag that slider around, I can make some pretty cool sounds. Oh, that sounds a little bit like Morse code. That's just me wibbling the mouse like mad. But that slider gives us a great amount of control and a great amount of customizability. Or customizability. A great deal of options. Okay, I'm going to press stop on that now. You may have heard that whilst it got quite high-pitched, it didn't get very high-pitched. We can change that if we just make the size of our slider bigger. So in the line, slider equals create slider 0 to 500. 500 there is the limit. We can make it a higher limit. Let's have 1000. So create slider 0 to 1000. Let's click play. There we are. It's beginning to sound like a 1960s Doctor Who episode. So, for the most part, that's what we have for our synthesizer. But if you want to change the voice, if you want to change the sound that Oscar is making, well, we've got a couple options. So in the line where I say Oscar equals new p5.oscillator sine, I could change the word sine to be a couple of other things. If you type in something that doesn't exist, it'll throw a wobbly. It'll tell you off. But there are a couple ones that I know do exist. One of them is triangle. This is a triangle wave. And when I click play, we can see that it's a much more buzzy sound. So triangle's quite an interesting one. The next one I'm going to turn it down a bit because it's not the most pleasant sounding. But we've got another one called square. Now, if you're into retro games, most of the music in retro games is made out of square waves. But square is the word in question. Let's click play. Okay, that's really unpleasant to listen to. It sounds like you've unplugged your headphones and stamped on them. But that's square. There's another one we can use. This one isn't the name of a shape. There's no such thing as a pentagon wave. Although it would be cool if there were. No, there is another one called sawtooth. So saw as in, wood saw, or I saw the goose. I don't know. Sawtooth. Just all one word. Sawtooth. Which sounds like a demonic clown, but there you are. There's sawtooth. I'm going to change that back to sine because it's just much nicer on the ears. Okay, so we've got our raw ingredients, so to say, for making interesting, weird electronic sounds. Now we have our raw ingredients. It's time to add a little bit of spice. So we're going to be adding some effects. And if you were around back in the day, I mean, it was only about a couple of months ago, but back in the day I did a stream about audio effects on your voice. We're going to apply some of the same audio effects here, but it'll have interesting side effects because we're doing this with a pure tone rather than a human voice, which has multiple tones. So, all we are going to do here happens inside the setup function. So I'm going to go to the after I've created the slider, I'm going to press enter a couple of times to give me some space, and we can start writing out our new effects that we're going to have. And one of the first effects is a nice simple one. It's the reverb effect. And the reverb effect basically adds a little bit of echo onto something, makes it sound like it's in a large hall or a cavern. And we need to give our reverb... We need to get our words right. No, we need to give our reverb a name. So let's call it reverb. I know, very imaginative. What is reverb? Well, reverb equals... And we need a new instance, new copy of reverb from the P5 library. So new P5 dot reverb, REVERB, with a capital R. And as is my catchphrase, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. Just to finish off that line. So you should have the line inside your setup function, reverb equals new P5 dot reverb, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. I'm going to press enter after that a couple of times, because now we've created it, we can actually use it. We can say reverb, this time with no capital, because I want it to match this variable here. Reverb equals... Sorry, what am I talking about? Oh, I've been a numpty. No, not equals. Reverb dot process, because we are going to process the sound of Oscar. Open bracket. What are we going to process? I just said it. We're going to process Oscar. So, Oscar. I'm typing that between the brackets. And I finish off that line, of course, with our good old friend, the semicolon. So, reverb.process Oscar. Now, when I press play, it should give us a reverb effect on our synth. Nice little ditty there. That was just me clicking on random parts of the slider. But did you hear how it had a little bit more depth to it? It sounded a little bit more, real. That was the reverb effect, giving it a little bit more voice. Let's just go again. There we are. That's a nice little effect to have. Now, you may not want that in your sample pack. So, what you can do instead, what you can do if you want to get rid of that, you can either delete that line, or if you think you might want to use it again, you can go to the front of that line, and you can put 2 slashes in. I think that's a forward slash. Yeah, forward slash. The 2 forward slashes are comments. It's basically saying to JavaScript, I've written a line here, ignore this line. So by putting 2 forward slashes in front of reverb.process Oscar, I've turned reverb off for now. So if I try it again, that's reverb off. If I delete the 2 forward slashes, that's reverb on. So we can actually hear the effects that it makes. Okay. Onto my words today. Where am I? Sorry. Anyway, onto the next effect, which is pretty much my favourite one, just because you get some really, really weird stuff going on with it. After my reverb stuff, remember you decide whether you want to keep reverb on or not. We can start writing our delay effect. See what I did there? I had a delay for the... anyway, bad joke. The delay effect is basically like... It's very much like reverb in that it creates an echo, but it creates a very mungy echo. It just kind of mushes everything together and makes a really cool sound. At least I think so. And just like we did with reverb, we need to give it a name, and we're going to be boring. We're going to say it's delay, D-E-L-A-Y, delay equals new P5 dot delay with a capital D, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. So the line there should be delay equals new P5 dot delay with a capital D, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. On the next few lines, we can actually do the the processing part, which is just like processing for reverb. It's delay dot process open bracket. What are we wanting to process? Well, we want to process Oscar. So I'm going to type out Oscar. But before I finish my command, my sentence, I need to add in a few more details because delay takes some parameters. It takes some numbers that change how it works. So I've now just finished typing Oscar. I'm going to follow Oscar up with a comma. And here we are going to put the first number. And now this number represents the number of seconds that the delay effect comes in. And it can't be more than 1. So it could be any number from 0 to 1. So if we wanted it quite a long delay, we might want 0.9. Yeah, let's leave it at 0.9. That's quite a long delay. We can hear the effect then. After I've typed in the number of seconds that the delay lasts, I'm going to press comma. And I'm going to follow this up with another number. This number represents how mushy the sound is. This is called the feedback loop modifier. And basically it affects how much of the original sound gets repeated back. It's hard to explain. I'm just going to set this to a number. Again, it needs to be less than 1. Let's try 0.9 again. We can always tweak these to see what effect that has. So I've got my feedback loop modifier. Follow that up with a comma. And we come on to our last number. Now, I'm not really sure what this number does. I believe it affects what frequency your sounds decay to. So the higher the number, the more kind of breathy and airy and high-pitched the sound turns out after it's decayed a while. If it's quite lower, I think it has not much effect at all. But just as an example, I'm going to type in 3,000, let's 4,000. 4,000. It's a high number, but in my experiments beforehand, that produced a quite fancy effect. And of course, that's our last number. That means we're at the end of the delay command. That means, hello you, it's a lovely semicolon. Okay, so in total, the line you should have is delay.process, open bracket, Oscar, comma, then a number below 1, comma, then another number below 1, comma, then a number that can be pretty much anything above 0, then a close round bracket, then a semicolon. And with that in place, you should have something quite interesting. Is the volume low enough? Just checking on the Stream Manager. Yep, I hope it is. I don't want Google to come and arrest me for blowing up everyone's ears. Let's click play. Okay, the delay effect is in place. I'm going to turn the frequency up and down again. And as you can see, we get some pretty interesting effects. Let me fiddle around with that, see if we can get anything fun out of it. Yeah, we're starting to get something a little bit interesting. I'm not saying it's good music, but it's interesting. And there we are. We've just created the soundtrack to a horror film. Yeah, so you can have some interesting experiments with that. Let's change the numbers around in the delay.process, see if we can get anything more interesting out of it. So I said the first number represents the time. Let's make that 0.1. Let's make that quite fast. See what we get. Oh dear, we're in the 70s now. Yeah, let's change that back. Let's never go back to the 70s. Okay, the next number was the feedback amount, and if we turn this down, let's say to 0, we kind of have nothing. We've kind of turned the entire delay effect off. So let's put that up to 0.1. And we just got a nice little echo. Nothing grand, nothing major. So that one's quite a nice one to play around with. Let's turn this number at the end down to 0, see what we get. You see, it kind of gives. It doesn't decay much at all. It just kind of keeps staying the same. Let's change that to something like 100, see if we get more decay. Oh, interesting. And let's turn it up to, I don't know, a couple of million. I'm not sure if I can detect any change there. It's doing something. I don't know what it's doing. Oh, that's an interesting effect. Oh, yeah. That was just me going from 0 to the top of the slider very fast and back again. So you can have lots of fun playing around with those. And of course, you can change the oscillator again. So let's go to triangle. And that will have a different effect. If I do this very slowly, it sounds like the beginning to... I don't know. I begin to some kind of horror film, but there you are. That's not all. I'm going to turn the delay off for now, just because I want to give everyone's ears a break. So, to remember to turn something off, we go to the process line, and we put 2 forward slashes in front of it. What we can do is we can actually double up on how many oscillators we have. We don't have to be stuck with just one oscillator. We can have multiple oscillators. And each oscillator can have lots of different effects or pitches or so on. So this is one way you could have a... Yeah, actually, let's do that. Let's do that. So I've called my first oscillator Oscar. I need a different name for my next oscillator. So what's got as much pun potential as Oscar, but is something different? Let's think. Oscar 2. Oscar 2 equals new P5 dot oscillator with a capital O. And remember, I can make this any type of oscillator I like. I'm going to make it the same oscillator this time, just because I want to try something that I haven't tested before, so we'll see how it turns out. I'm going to make this triangle again. And remember, finish off every line with a semicolon. I need to turn Oscar down to low volume. Sorry, Oscar 2. So Oscar 2 dot amp 0.1 semicolon. This would have been much faster and much easier to just copy and paste, but I'm committed now. Oscar 2 dot freak 0 semicolon Oscar 2 dot start. Now I could start Oscar 2 off on a preset frequency, and that will give a nice drone effect to the to the output. Or I could also change the value of Oscar 2's frequency using the slider. And that's what I am going to do. So remember, we use the slider in the draw function. What I could do is I could say Oscar 2 dot freq open bracket slider dot value open bracket close bracket, and then I need to close the bracket for the dot freak. Then I need to finish it off with a semicolon. So what we've done is kind of useless. All we have is we have two oscillators now, but they are playing the exact same frequency. And that's kind of pointless. It's just not worth it. It might make things a little bit louder, but it's not going to do anything useful to us. So instead, I'm not going to set Oscar 2.frequency to slider.value. I'm going to, add something to it. I'm going to up that a little bit to give a kind of two tones at once. So I'm going to, in Oscar.frequency slider.value, I'm going to add 100 to it. So Oscar would be quite low pitched. Oscar 2 would be slightly higher pitched. And the two oscillators playing at once will give a very interesting effect. I hope. I haven't tested this. There we are. It's kind of, definitely sounds like there's two of them, but it's just added a little bit more uniqueness to the note. What happens if I were to get rid of the plus 100 and instead times the slider value by 2? So as we increase the slider, Oscar 2 is going to get higher and higher and higher pitched, but not as in a manner that is faster than Oscar gets higher pitched. So slider.value times 2. And of course the symbol for times is an asterisk. Let's see what we get. There we go. It's given it a kind of more, voice-like quality. It's interesting. It's a nice little effect. I think I preferred it at plus 100 though. So we've basically got there two instruments playing at once. And of course, if we use reverb and delay again, we can add different effects to each of them. So if I bring back the reverb.process for Oscar, and I bring that the delay.process, but I change it to not delay Oscar, but Oscar 2, we can see what effect that has. Ooh. Ooh, that's interesting. Interesting thing about audio processing, it seems that no matter what you do, you just end up creating horror soundtracks. But that's a nice little fact. Is there anything I want to add to this? No, I've got 1 minute left. 30 seconds left. Let's I'll go on then. I'll do one more thing. Let's see what it sounds like if we have one of them being triangle and the other being, let's say, sine. So I set Oscar 2 to sine. Ooh. Did I not press play? Ah! I know what I've done. I've thrown an error. So this console has come up saying that there's been an error. It's because I commented out the wrong thing. I commented out the reverb, whereas I meant to comment out the reverb.process. There we are. Anyway, that's it for this session. I hope it has been enjoyable. I hope you've made some very interesting, weird sounds. It's it's interesting looking into audio processing. It's quite a nice thing. And believe it or not, this is exactly how that sample pack distorted reality was made. It started off with a very simple, clean synthesizer sound, an oscillator sound. And I just piled on lots and lots and lots of different effects. And if you have a look on the internet, you'll find there are countless audio effects out there. There's things like ring modulators, there's things like band filters, band pass, low pass, high pass, LFO, all sorts. You can make some really crazy sounds. And for this session, I will leave you to the demo song that they included in the Distorted Reality 2 sample pack to show off what the sample pack could do. So in any case, I hope you've had a lovely evening, and goodbye.